teachers. I want to take just a minute to share with you a back-to-school social studies collaborative poster and an activity that's included that you can use for team building and setting your classroom norms during the first week of school. And so this poster is available in my TPT shop, but I just wanted to go over it with you so you kind of know what all is included so you can see if it'd be a good fit for your class. So essentially, I've created a collaborative poster. So each student fills out and completes one piece of the poster to put together to create one big wall design like this that you can see. I've got several different ones on the back. But this particular one that I have is really about setting classroom norms for our social studies class. Now, if you don't teach social studies, I've also listed this on TPT where it just says in our room we are. And so you could use that if you teach library, if you teach math or something other than just social studies. Let me scroll down here for a second. So here's the example of what it will look like when it's done. This particular is the 18 by 27-inch poster, and that has 24 pieces. But I've included a poster with 36 pieces, so if you have a bigger class, and also 18 pieces. So if you have a smaller class, maybe you're doing this in just a small group. All of the pieces here have varied amounts of detail, so you can really just give each student the right piece, as you can see here. So there's lots of different ones that you can do. And once this all comes together, you can talk about these different terms that are on this collaborative poster. In our classroom, we're welcoming, we're open-minded, we're listeners. So setting some of those classroom norms of what does our classroom look like, sound like, feel like. One of the things that you might be, where I've had a couple questions about is why does it say unlearning down in the bottom? Right down here it says unlearning. And I put that term in there because I think it is so important. When we are learning, oftentimes we have to unlearn things. There might be misconceptions or unfounded ideas or concepts that are wrong, and we have to unlearn those things. And I think it's important we set that up at the beginning of the year when we're setting our classroom norms so that we have a space that is safe to unlearn. I read a book recently called Think Again by Adam Grant, and one of the things that stood out to me was that we can really be excited when we learn that we're wrong about something. I know that sounds just like, what? But we actually, when we find out that we're wrong about something, the good news is now that we're less wrong than we were before. So looking at it in that way. So that's why I have that term unlearning. But lots of different terms in there. And that's only one piece of this collaborative poster. I really wanted to put this together so that you have something for the first week of school. And I know that when it comes to back to school, the last thing you want to do is have to figure out your bulletin boards in your first week of icebreakers without it being like cheesy. And I do want to just point out real fast, I use this sticky tack to put the posters together, as you see back here, so that they don't ruin the wall. You could tape them on if you wanted, but I just use a sticky tack. It's like a reusable adhesive. You can find that at like any craft store. But going back, so I've included a first week of school activity that really coincides with this poster. So what I've put everything you need in here. So you're going to get your file that has this poster. So here's what this looks like. This is like 24 pieces. So your students would fill this out and cut it out and label it. But the lesson that goes with this is really about identity and diversity. So these are aligned with the social justice standards. So the first piece, as you can see here, let's understand identity. So this goes into setting the definition of what identity and diversity are. They're kind of hot words right now. And so I think that at the beginning of the year, it's important that we establish the meaning of those words in our classroom so that when it comes up, our students have an agreed upon understanding of the word identity and diversity. Okay, so, and then how it relates. I think in social studies, we always wanted things to come back and relate to that connection piece. So in this particular one, Your students are going to learn about identity and then recognize that there's visible and invisible identity. And there's a little chart here, and they can do this based on what they believe to be visible or invisible. Can have some great discussions about that. And then understanding diversity. Diversity is really how things are different, how our experiences and our ways of life overlap. And really, diversity is what makes the world interesting. And that's what makes our class interesting and beautiful. So students are going to fill in this box, this identity box, with things that represent them. So if they're maybe first generation American citizen, maybe they come from a family of musicians, and you can choose. You could have your students print out images from the computer and glue them on there, or you could have them draw. For me personally, I'm not great at drawing, and so I would prefer to use the computer, but it really depends on your resources and what you feel comfortable with your students doing. But it's a great way for students to get to know one another. So after your students create this identity box, and you could do this over the course of the first week of school, then you would break into small groups, or you could even have a whole group if you wanted, depending on your class size. And your students would share their identity box, and then your students would write down, what did they learn about their classmates that maybe they didn't know? What do they have in common? Maybe what is different? And then asking really to go deeper. Did they learn anything about their classmates that might affect how they interact or treat their classmates, and why? So those are just some of the things that can be really helpful in setting those classroom norms of what does our classroom look like, sound like, feel like at the beginning of the year. And I hope that this collaborative poster is something that would be useful to you. Especially with our older kids, we're looking for something that's not cheesy. I know I don't really like icebreakers, but I feel like this is something that maybe our middle school, high school students would be more on board with than those little cheesy games. So here's just a little quick overview. I hope this is helpful.